All right. So before we kick off today, I want to introduce Nick Madrid, who's our co-founder, co-builder here at the Free Toaster. Nick, this is the first time I believe you've been on the pod. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. It was actually ironic having run a podcast and newsletter with you. Not only just the first time on this pod, it's actually the first time I've been on any pod, and so I'm very happy that this is the first one. So
Oh, that's awesome. That's definitely an iconic moment. So I'm happy to be a part of it, Nick. So I was hoping we would kick off, maybe just give people a flavor for your background, where you spend your time today. And then I wanted to kind of jump in and reflect on the last year building out the newsletter.
I have a pretty interesting background, as I like to describe. Majored in Spanish and Portuguese. Went to business school, primarily for finance, but specifically investment management, so the capital markets. Worked at Bloomberg for almost 10 years in product and engineering, built 2 products for them. Worked at Chime for a little over 3 years. And then you and I crossed paths at a very short stint at an auto lending refinance company. And then you and I launched Toaster a year ago. And so, long story short, I think we've found the power and the opportunity in media. And so maybe we can get to talk about some of the learnings there, having been doing it for a year. But I'm really excited about what we have planned for next year. It's been a fun journey.
And do you want to mention briefly your other newsletters, VC Uncovered? I know you work on other stuff people may not have heard of, but I think it may be relevant to some listeners.
So I dedicate my time now exclusively to media properties. The Free Toaster is probably the most prominent right now, but we've also launched VC Uncovered, which is uncovered media, part of an uncovered media brand, where we're uncovering the newest generation of venture capitalists, kind of like the principals and maybe the more junior people is not the right word. So we have LP Uncovered for limited partners and investors. We're going to have Founder Uncovered. We're going to have senior operators at CTO Uncovered and CMO Uncovered. And then we have Thesis Uncovered, which are the ideas behind the venture capital firms and the best they're out there. But it's all kind of the very similar playbook where we do a newsletter and podcast, and we really try to drive conversation and really try to help people.
All right. So retrospective now on Free Toaster. So just to set this up, we published our very first edition, and I'm in the account now. I want to say it was October 24, so 14 months ago. We built the list up to 1,200 plus subscribers, and looking at the metrics, Nick, you showed me this the other day, but I was kind of blown away by the number of visitors the freetoaster.com has per month, and it's something like 5,000, 6,000 hits per month, something in that range. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, it might even be more than that. I'm looking right now. We have over 13,000 active users, so many more people looking at the content than actually subscribing to it, and I think that's pretty expected. I guess one of the interesting principles, you and I, for the most part, have always wanted a lot of our content open and accessible, and so I think that's a testament to that. I see, over 30,000 views, so really impressive numbers, even more than the 1,200 that we've earned. And honestly, we've heard those 1,200 pretty, we were blocking and tackling. We explored many different growth hacks for the newsletter space. But what's interesting is that everything we've done, we've kind of fought for hand in hand and had zero paid effort in this to date.
Yeah, no, that's it. I would describe our approach so far as publishing multiple times a week. Per our Beehive account, it's 118 posts, which is pretty crazy for 14 months. So I think we're averaging maybe even a little more than twice a week, because we have editorial pieces we write. We do the news almost every week, and then we have the jobs, which is really firing on all cylinders again. And that is coming back to life due to a key hire you made, Nick. And maybe we'll get into that component of that later. So I guess some of the lessons I learned over the year, I'm curious what some of the big ones are for you. But the big ones for me are it's extremely hard to predict what people want to read in the industry. So my approach so far has been write on a variety of topics and see where we have, maybe disproportionate attention or feedback. There was a piece we wrote. I think I was primary author, and you helped me edit and get it to the last mile on New Balance. And that article actually ended up going viral on the
Yeah.
internet, and it still produces new subscribers. And we published it almost a year ago, exactly.
Yeah.
But I guess that was one of my big lessons. It's very hard to predict. So consistency, I think, for me was huge. I'm also seeing a little bit of acceleration lately. Now that we have more of a subscriber base, I'm seeing people share with colleagues, that sort of thing. We've always seen the pattern of folks from one company all subscribe kind of on the same moment within like 5-10 minutes. I assume that's somebody sharing on a Slack channel and coming in. But given your vantage point across multiple newsletters, all of them B2B, kind of what have been some of your biggest observations and lessons?
Yeah. So if someone asks, like, I'm interested in doing this, like, what should I consider? There's a core principle about like writing online and like putting yourself out there that you'll attract the right people to you. And I really believe there's something to that. Like with us, like you said, like we didn't quite know what would stick or what will be people be interested in, but just the act of publishing on a weekly basis. You then look at the data, but then you also like see these random inbound emails or, pings like, hey, I really like that, or have you thought about this? And that gives you a signal into what you should double down on, what you should ignore. And so that's a learning that I've learned, I guess, in practice. I've always like heard about it, but I've actually seen it, right? Both with Toaster and then the other properties. And then for me, I tend to think I'm very an operations focused person. And so I think about the guts and the internals and the tools that we built to enable us to do this at scale. And also to give you a little taste, and maybe I'm manifesting the future of like what we're going to go into. We've got a lot of inbound around small business lending as an example. But you and I have been hyper focused on consumer lending. But now I would love to launch, and maybe this is me sharing what part of our vision, like we're going to launch a small business lending newsletter and podcast, similar to Toaster, but also discrete from Toaster. And the tools and tech and operations that we've built internally allows us to curate the news in a way that makes sense, allows us to curate the jobs in a ways that make sense, that otherwise would not have been enable us to do. And so when I think about the learnings, like it's really hard to take a fire hose of information, both whether you're getting from LinkedIn or news or whatever the input is, to then screen it and source it and then curate it in a way that makes sense. Like learning all of that over the last year and then validating what makes sense and what readers want to read has been fun.
That reminds me of something I think our readers or our listeners will find interesting. You mentioned a lot of like the scale and automation you built. Can you give people a taste of the automation behind the news feed and the jobs feed? Just kind of like what are some of the nuts and bolts and the guts behind that?
Maybe this is a good like separate episode, but we use a few things, and all of this has been vibe coded in Replit, and I'm a very pro Replit. There's actually a number of platforms out there that could do this. I just happen to go with Replit. But essentially, we probably ingest anywhere from like 6,000 to 8,000 news stories a week for free Toaster for consumer lending, and through that we have a relatively sophisticated scoring algorithm. So we pull out key topics on each story, we pull out key companies, we pull out key corporate actions, we pull out key sources, and we essentially score every one of those 8,000 stories that we ingest. We then manually go through, we sort that with the highest scores first. We then manually go through that and we validate every one of those stories. And then we find like the original source if we need to. We go deeper on some of the stories. But yeah, we do that on a weekly basis, and basically the same process for jobs as well.
And then the last mile is Nick and I always looking at the output with our own eyes and kind of applying
I
our
think that's the
judgment.
most important,
Yeah.
because you hear about these other newsletters that are pure AI driven and pure AI generated. And I think you can kind of tell, and they're not as good. And they don't meet our bar of, of expectations.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've told you this many times, Nick, but I still hear at least once a month from someone in my network of how much they appreciate the news feed, like how dialed in it is to the niche, how helpful it is, and how people kind of look at it as like their go-to one-stop shop for news here. But you've officially exposed that I am not personally reading the news and selecting the stories and writing up the summaries. So
That's true.
some people have that perception, which I'm not going to fight them on, but now that we're getting into the guts, that's officially gone, right? No one's going to be sitting there thinking that I'm the one spending 8 hours a day putting out the news feed. But I guess just to transition to the other point you made, which maybe there's a call to the community here. When we decide, and I agree, Nick, it's not an if, it's a when, we decide to expand everything we've built into the small business category. The thing we're missing today is someone in the community that can be kind of the spokesperson, the person behind the newsletter, that can share it on LinkedIn, that can write editorials, that can bring people on in that niche onto a podcast and interview them. Basically, kind of the role I'm playing for consumer.
Yeah.
We would need someone like that in the small business world.
Correct. And maybe you can share some of your insights. So, you have another company that you're running and building as well. And I would love to hear about how Toaster has helped you in that world. And like when we think about our next talent or our next, person that we're going to bring on, we want to allow this small business toaster, which is not the name, maybe, I don't know if that's going to be the name or not, but like the small business lending toaster, like I would want that to help them in a similar way. So maybe you can talk about some of the benefits that you've seen, and then we can try to find that perfect small business person.
Let's take a quick break in the action here, because I'd like to introduce you to our newest sponsor, Fintel Connect. They're an affiliate marketing platform that can help connect you to publishers, influencers, and manage your compliance. You may have heard of platforms like CJ, Rakuten, and Impact, but none of those platforms serve financial services companies exclusively. That's where Fintel Connect shines. Folks that have used their platform tend to talk about their compliance platform and their ability to connect with social media and influencer publishers that you may not find elsewhere. Additionally, because they're FI only, they have a deep empathy for the challenges that lenders and banks have when they run their affiliate marketing programs. I'd love for you to check them out. You can find them at fintelconnect.com, FINTEL connect.com, where you can connect directly with their founder and CRO.
So Nick, on the question of kind of how the newsletter's been helping my my marketing agency, so I guess just to give folks context, I launched that business late 23, early 24. Just took on a couple clients initially and then have been building for the last 2 years. And my initial sorts of clients was a mix of people that discovered me on LinkedIn and people just from my network, people I've worked with over the years in consumer lending. So from the very beginning of my days as a consultant and as kind of an operator of an agency, I knew that social media was kind of a big part of my sales motion. And when you and I decided to build Toaster, Nick, I think part of my thesis was expanding the content I was already doing into longer form newsletters, longer form podcasts could only help. So that was kind of the thesis back then. As far as how to play it out, I actually looked at all of our sales in our agency over the last 2 years. We've signed 12 clients over that time period. Not all of them are active right now, but over that 2 years, we've worked with 12 clients. And 50% have come from my network, and 50% have come from people finding me online, right? The hard thing about bucket 2 is I'd have no idea, was it the podcast, was it the newsletter, was it my short form on LinkedIn? I think all of those things play a role, but attribution has been a challenge for me. But I can go off of what people tell me. And I remember on many sales calls, folks telling me, oh, I appreciate your newsletter. I like it. I've been following for a while. So it's definitely had an impact to the point where people proactively go out of their way to mention it. As far as the podcast itself, it's interesting because all the folks that really like the deep dives that have told me, hey, they're fans. One of them was already a client by the time they were like, okay, I love the podcast, it's helpful. And then the others were leads, but they didn't end up closing. But they still told me they found it valuable. So like I still think those deals could play out sometime in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But net, yeah, no, I think it's had a really positive effect on the marketing agency business. The only thing I'll say is just attribution is hard, but it's all good. The business is working. I think the toaster has been a big part of that, so I'm happy with the results.
I do think it's given you also access you probably otherwise wouldn't have had. So like you got that inbound from that PR agency that was wanting to get you announcing the launch of that one big thing, which I'm not announcing on purpose. But there was that thing, and then even getting into some conferences as well. I thought you've been able to get, or at least were offered some media passes, maybe for some spots you otherwise wouldn't have been able to get. So I think there's something unique that happens with the media property, which is just kind of fun. And then just as you reach out to get people on the podcast, or as we profile people, at least as we've seen on the uncovered media side, it's just the fact that it's coming from a third party just kind of helps get you access to otherwise you wouldn't have been able to have.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I didn't mention this earlier, but I think this is important. For me, looking back a year ago, or maybe 14 months ago, like before we launched this podcast and the newsletter, one of the biggest existential risks to my business, I think, was like the LinkedIn algo, probably. Like, if LinkedIn stopped distributing my posts, or something happened to reach in LinkedIn, or maybe some other creator that did something similar to me started stealing impressions I would have otherwise gotten, that would have been it just would have made it more challenging for me to go to market and find new customers and new clients. But with the newsletter and the podcast, like I imagine a world, like let's say LinkedIn disappeared tomorrow, there was no LinkedIn. I think it would be hard to grow our newsletter. So I'll just acknowledge that. But at least we would have a way, it would be harder to grow it. But we would have a way to reach folks in this niche through these other channels that we directly own, through the emails and through the subscribership on the show, on the podcast. So I think there's something to be said for any agency owner that runs a service business that's reliant on LinkedIn and social media, building that direct distribution. I don't know that completely de-risks like the LinkedIn problem, but it definitely, like, I sleep better at night knowing that we have this asset in the free toaster, because maybe my sales would go down a little bit without LinkedIn, but I still think I could make it work, is my hunch.
And I think it brings up another thing that most people don't know, I would say, is in addition to the subscribership, right, that we have with the newsletter and with our podcast subscribers, we have a pretty robust CRM that we're building behind the scenes, so which is much larger than the total subscriber list that we have. And I think that's important because it's giving us insight into who our true ICP is, who we eventually want to capture. And the reality is that, like, we're not going to capture everyone in a newsletter. And I think you and I understand that, which maybe at some point we'll talk about what we have planned for next year. And like, it's that broader CRM that's hyper focused on our ICP, but we know that the newsletter is only some of that. Like, we still want to reach them in different ways. And, we focused a lot on the digital component, the newsletter and the podcast. There's also a big in real life component that I think that broader, larger CRM enables us to activate if and when we need to.
Can you talk more about CRM and like how you source folks that are candidates for either articles we've written or for invitations to events? Like how does that all come together?
I've actually evaluated a lot of CRMs. This is not a sales call for Adio, ATTIO.com. It's Google Ventures backed, but it's a more modern CRM that I've just found incredibly powerful. And so with everything I do, it's integrated in my day-to-day. They have a really smart Chrome extension. And so anytime I come across an individual or a company, I add them to our broader CRM. And with the LinkedIn extension, it's the same Chrome extension, but it's specialized for LinkedIn. It then starts annotating a lot of information that we otherwise would not have had. So, I probably won't share the number, but we have a much larger number in our CRM, larger than our 1,200 plus subscribers and our 13,000 viewers. And we just, a lot of it could be like top down and bottom up, right? So you imagine a world where top down, we know the big firms that we care about, we search, and we have some people on our team that help find the individuals and add them. The fact that we look at 8,000 news stories a week, anytime a new company pops up, that gets flagged and we add that to our CRM. And then naturally, once we have a company, then we can find the right people and so forth. And then just you and I naturally just live in LinkedIn world. And so we naturally come across things as well. So you imagine a world where everything we do day to day gets input into there. And then now we have multiple people like you and me and others on our team that enable us to augment that. It becomes a really powerful thing for us.
I want to pause here for a second to tell you about one of our sponsors, Spinwheel. They've built an API that streamlines your lending application form with just 2 fields. When a customer shares just their birth date and phone number, they can go grab all the information needed to pre-fill their application form. So regardless of what channel you play in, you know that the higher the application rate goes, the lower your cost of acquisition becomes, and the more media you can buy to generate growth. Additionally, they can give you real-time verified consumer credit data and seamless payment processing, which can help you serve customers beyond the initial application. To see a demo, go to spinwheel.io or check out the link in the show notes. It'll hook you up straight with their head of growth.
One thing to add, Nick, on the retrospective, I think is worth calling out. We added sponsors to our newsletter, I would say really, really early as compared to say like consumer newsletter type businesses that only can add sponsors when they have 50,000, 100,000, 500,000 subscribers. I want to say we signed our first sponsors when we had like 300 subscribers, something like that. It was like month 3, something like that. Just to call out our sponsors, Fintel Connect, Spinwheel, CTP1, CTB1, and Fiat Growth. Those companies have bet on us from the very beginning before we had anything really all that proven. But I think that was a big part of the reason that we're able to build this out is because like the automation you talked about, the outside help that we get on editing and production, none of this stuff is free, and it's hard work. And without support from our sponsors, I think it would have been a lot harder to make this happen.
I agree. Obviously, very fortunate for them, enable us to do this. But also, we were pretty selective in who we worked with too. And so not only did these sponsors allow us to kind of understand more about what they do and how they truly help our ICP, it deepened our knowledge of how we're trying to help. It also gave us an access to learn more about the people behind that. And so I think it's been very helpful. I know you've done a lot of sessions with Alana from Fintel Connect as an example, or Tomas from Spinwheel. And so it's just been really fun to kind of not just have them as a named sponsor, but rather we believe in what they're doing, knowing our audience and what they need.
One other principle I forgot to mention, which it's going to segue to something I'd love for you to talk about more, Nick, is from the very beginning, we knew our monetization model would not be just sponsorships on our newsletter. We knew that would be a part of it, but part of our thesis for building a publication and a podcast in this particular niche is because we believe we can build software businesses, service businesses, potentially an events business underneath the umbrella of what we're already doing with our content. And the business I was able to build for affiliate marketing, I think, is an example. But I think we'd love to get this to the point where we have a direct mail marketing agency, we have a social media marketing agency, we have potentially a number of other services, and maybe even an events circuit, which I think closely connects to our content. But maybe let's spin off and talk about events a little bit, since I know you've been spending a lot of time thinking about this.
Where do I even start? The reality is that, what you'll hear is people are craving this in-person kind of component to our day-to-day. I work from home. There's an office in the city with one other company I work with, so I go in there maybe once a week. And there is something enjoyable about that. But even beyond that, it's like I'm a full-time worker, but also a dad, 2 under 4, essentially. And so when I do choose to go somewhere, it needs to be incredibly efficient and the high ROI. And so taking those principles and applying, how could we do that for our own ICP and the people that we're trying to serve? There's a couple ways we could think about this. And before I get there, I love reading, and I'm happy to publish this somewhere, but there was a LinkedIn post from Sam Jacobs, and he says, I'm just going to read right now because I think it's important. He's like, cold calling a complete stranger has a less than 1% connect rate. But when you walk up to a complete stranger at a trade show or a conference and introduce yourself, there's a 100% connection rate. And that's just so simple, yet so true. And so what we're exploring, when we think about who we're curating and how we not only curate the conversation, but you curate the room, we want to put the right people in the right room at the right time. It's now opened up this opportunity set for, we can do small curated dinners, truly helping people connect and meet and deepen that relationship. And then even do that more at scale in the more conference world, which we're going to launch, next year, really just improving that for members of our ICP. And the only thing I'll quickly add that I think is different from others is when you see a lot of these major conferences now, like Money 2020, and there's not to knock on anything like Money 2020, but it's too big, it's too broad, and like core to everything we do is niche. And we want to stay niche and stay very close to the actual execution and operations, and not maintain this strategy pie in the sky ivory tower kind of thing, but rather, no, we're gonna stay as close to the execution and that we can, knowing that that's A, an opportunity because no one's doing that, and B, that's what people need right now.
I don't think I've shared this one with you, Nick, but one thing that is connected to this, what you just said around meeting in person. And I love Sam Jacobs, but I love that you mentioned him because he's one of my favorites on LinkedIn. If I compare my sales rate on potential customers for the marketing agency, and it's like, imagine like a double bar chart. The first half is people I have met in person, and then the other half is people I have not met in person. The sales rate is just materially different. It's to the point now where when folks are in my pipeline, I will go out of my way to visit the city they're in hopes that we can meet in person, even if it's coffee or lunch or something very casual. Because the act of meeting in person builds just a different level of connection, which drives through, it pulls through to business and to revenue. So I've seen it firsthand in what I do. But to your comment on very niche, I'm very excited about this idea of getting folks just in consumer lending who are just in marketing. And I'm thinking partnerships, social media, direct mail, maybe search, like those 4 categories, where folks can have really direct and meaningful operational discussions with current partners, future partners, current vendors, future vendors. I just, to your point on Money 2020 being too big, I could name a bunch of others, Affiliate Summit East, Finovate. None of them have ever really quite worked for me in this niche of consumer lending marketing. So yeah, I'm super excited to collaborate with you to try to make this happen next year.
Yeah, I would love. I mean, we've gotten early reads on that. We know this could work for us, and I would love to see if any one of our listeners would want to jump on this as well and partner with us. We're obviously looking for the people who can speak to this work, that can speak to the challenges that they're facing running with AI, and obviously that has to be a component, but I think it's deeper than that as well. When you think about DM, direct mail as an example, like in how massive a growth channel that still is, and that's still like, I don't know if AI is like disrupted direct mail or let alone can as much. Like we're still going to go in like the exciting, non-sexy areas. And I think we're excited for that. And I think that the key here for us is it's going to be curated. It will be like an invite only kind of thing. You can apply to get, to join, and like, it's the curation component that's worked so well for us that I don't want to like get away from. We've curated the right news, we've curated the right podcast guests, we're now curating the right room and conversation. And I think that's a core principle that can still come through, and that we've seen validated in other areas as well.
Yeah, one thing I want people that you've shared with me over and over, I want people to connect with, especially potential sponsors, is when we think events, we are not just thinking standard conference type events in like a hotel ballroom. We're thinking sometimes it's an outing at Top Golf for 18 holes, or it could be coffee in the morning, it could be lunch, it could be just any number of activities, right? That bring that right audience together. Could be in the evenings, could be in the mornings. Nick, you've mentioned the bounce house idea, which we could have an event with a bounce house. Like, why not?
Well, let's just build that out. So if you're a parent of young kids, I think I put this on Facebook, on LinkedIn a while back. Like, if we get enough interest, I will make it happen. We will have an event where you can bring your kids and the family. It'll be early enough when nothing's open, call it 8 a.m. when all the other kids are up, and let's just go bounce and let them go wild and like enjoy ourselves. Like nobody's done that. So maybe we're the first ones to do that.
Yeah, no, that'd be awesome. So like 8 to 10 o'clock, sun's out, we're having coffee, talking business, networking, and the kids are having a great time in the bounce house.
Yeah.
I would love to make that one happen, and I will do everything I can to bring my 2 little kids. So Nick, I know we're up on time here. Awesome to have you on the show. Hope to bring you back again here soon.
Great. Thanks, Carlos.